All right, a few hands and a few no hands, so great. We'll cover the full spectrum of the capabilities, and we'll spend most of our time actually walking through a demo. So what is Ask Data? Simply put, Ask Data is a natural language interface for Tableau. There's a variety of users today, consumers, dashboards, people who are new to Tableau, who still struggle with the platform. And we believe that with simpler interfaces like natural language, we can empower even more people to move towards a self-service model for analytics. And so how does Ask Data work? It starts with a question. And here you can see some input text. How many transactions were processed last week? Our semantic-based intent system derives that intent and structures it into a complete analytical query, which is then sent to Tableau, and it comes back with visualization. Given that it's completely integrated in the platform, all the visualizations that you get back are the standard Tableau visits that you would expect, and the other modalities such as drag and dropping. So what powers Ask Data? There's really three core pieces of technology: our semantic data model, our natural language query language, and our parser. So I'll touch on these just briefly. Let's walk through an example of how our semantic data model enriches the data so that our parser is really accurate. So in this example, the boxes are off a little bit, but that's okay. So in this example, we have recent income from chairs in Germany. This is a very colloquial or natural way that we may interact with a colleague, but there's a lot of ambiguity and under-specificity in this question. So let's take a look. Recent is something that we call a vague predicate. It's a natural way of talking about time, but it doesn't have an absolute definition. So we leverage usage patterns and popularity of how people are interacting with data to resolve that to the most popular date-time entity in that data source. And based on the distribution of that field, we can infer a reasonable default, such as 3 weeks. And if that doesn't meet your definition of recent, you can quickly repair and refine that to match your definition. And we'll take a look at how you do that in just a minute. Now let's move to income. Income is really, it might be a way that we talk about sales, but in this example, sales is actually the field in our data source. So you can add synonyms directly into the data source so that you can interact with your data in a way that's more conversational or natural for you. From a value listing standpoint, you can see that all we've specified here are chairs. And chairs is actually a value that lives in the product subcategory field. And we don't have to specify that or even know that. That allows us to interact with entities and values that we know about, but we may not understand the hierarchy or the structure of the data. And our data index can actually traverse through all of those fields and understand that chairs is a value that belongs in the product subcategory field. And lastly, another example of our semantic knowledge is some of the automatic enrichment that happens to every published data source in Tableau. Here, I've specified the term Germany, but my data source actually has abbreviated country codes like DE. And Ask Data can automatically infer those relationships and understand that Germany is the same thing as DE, even though my data source isn't modeled to contain all those aliases, such as Germany, etc. Okay, so let's get right into a demo and walk through some of these examples. All right, so here I have Ask Data. Can everyone in the back row see okay? Perfect. Okay, so this is a published data source. It's Superstore, our favorite. And you can see that we have an input box that allows us to directly interact with the data. So I can start interacting by simply asking questions here, such as, let me just move my laptop. What is the sum of sales in the USA? So take a look at that interpretation. That is Ask Data's intent based on the question that you've asked. And you can see that in the interpretation, we actually have the term United States. And that's an example of that automatic enrichment that happens. Even though I specify USA, we can understand that that maps to the actual value in the data, which is United States. And so, of course, we get a map back because we're talking about geospatial data, and we didn't have to specify that because based on the intent, we'll pick the best visualization for that question. But you don't have to stop at that first question. we often find that people love to explore and ask follow-up questions, and you can do that in Ask Data while maintaining the context of your previous question. So if I want to continuously break this question down into different partitions or different views, I can do that by looking at each state in this data source. So I've simply typed in for each state, but again, in a semantic-based system, we have to be robust to the variance that you can expect in terms of how people ask questions. So here I've asked for each state, but I may be very underspecified and just type in state. And you can see that there's a lot of different ways I can ask that same question, and we can derive that intent to make sure that it's successful. So now we've broken the sum of sales down for each state in the United States. Great. What if I only care about the top 5? So let's rank these states. And so I'm asking another follow-up question of just the top 5 states. And we can see the top 5 states in the set and all the other states out of the set. It's a visualization best practice that allows people to understand what is the difference, that threshold between 5 and everything else out of that set, because that might influence what I actually want to keep in that view. So maybe I want to expand that to the top 10. So I can simply just type in the top 10 states instead. And you can see that in a conversational state, we can actually replace existing phrases in that question. And now we're just expanding that limit and rank to include the top 10 states. Cool. Let's walk through another example. I'm just going to add a new sheet here in the bottom that allows me to ask a brand new question and have a blank slate to do that. So let's look at profitability. And I may type in something like profit over time. Sounds like a reasonable question, but take a look at the interpretation. You can see that there's a lot of ambiguity in that question. We did imply an aggregation of profit, so what do we actually mean? Do we want the average profit, the sum of profit? What are we looking for? Ask Data has a learning mechanism that sees how people interact with these fields and fills in those missing aggregations and components that you may have inadvertently left out. Same thing with time. We talked about vague predicates earlier, and again, we leverage usage and popularity signals to resolve these vague concepts of time to actual date-time entities that are in the field. And in this case, it's order date. So let's go ahead and select sum of profit by order date. And now we see this great line chart, which is perfect because we're talking about temporal data. But I can continuously refine and ask more questions to any single question in Ask Data. So if I want a more granular view of time, maybe I care about the month instead. And you can see again in that conversational refining experience, I'm replacing year with month to get a more granular view of time. But what if I only care about certain time durations, maybe between 2015 and 2017? Again, you can see from the interpretations, I was very underspecified in that question. Did I want to filter from profit between 2015 to 2017 dollars, or did I actually mean a date refinement? And you can see that all those interpretations helps us actually disambiguate our not fully formed thought. And so here, I actually wanted to filter on date, so let's go ahead and pick order date between 2015 and 2017, and that's super easy to do. Let's break this down by category to see how that trend breaks down by each category of products that I sell in this data source. And now we can see that broken down by my 3 main categories. But maybe I only care about technology. So again, I'm just typing in the term technology, and we can understand that that's a value that lives in the category field without having specified category. Awesome. Let's walk through a few more examples. Oftentimes we find that people have their own dialect within an organization. And it's hard when your data isn't structured to really help people converse in a way that's more natural to them. We've talked a little bit about all of the automatic enrichment that happens in Ask Data today, and that's true for sort of these general business purpose classes, things that don't really change across industries like dates, times, geographies. But what if you have your own unique lexicon? We have a variety of different ways where you can enrich your data with synonyms, both at the field and value level, so that you can make your data meet the conversation that you're having in your organization. So let's take a look at that. I have a profit ratio in this data source, which is a calculation. But maybe I have a abbreviation of how I refer to this. Maybe it's just PR. So you can see that I'm simply just adding a synonym to this field, and now anyone who accesses this data source can use those synonyms. So I can simply now just type in PR, and you can see that's resolved the profit ratio, which is about 12.5% in this store. But let's pretend for a second that I actually didn't have that calculation in the data source. In Ask Data, you can actually compute calculations ad hoc and on the fly. So if we wanted to recreate that profit ratio calculation, I can simply type in profit over sales, and you can see we're again inferring some of the missing pieces because it's not a complete question, and we're computing that calculation dynamically at runtime. But just like with the other questions, I can leverage those calculations in my follow-up questions as well. So if I want to break down the profit ratio for each state in my data, I can again ask that follow-up question for each state. We'll cancel today. And you can see that we're carrying the context of the calculation and computing that for each state in the data source. And I have this nice gradient of red through blue to give me a sense of where I'm really struggling with profitability, and I can quickly drill down into those problem areas. So let's take a look at a few of these. So the map is a great view to get a good sense of the spatial sort of data, but if I want to see comparison, maybe a bar chart is better. Changing any of the visualization types is super easy. I can leverage this drop down here to toggle between all the various valid visualization types, or I can use natural language to ask for, and you can see here that it's already picking it up, that I want to look at it as a bar chart. It's automatically sorted, so I can see all my most profitable states filtered by and sorted by my least profitable in the bottom. And it looks like Ohio is kind of there right at the bottom. Let's drill into Ohio. So I'm going to keep only Ohio and break this down a little bit so that I can figure out what might be causing this. So let's take a look at the different categories of things that I sell to see if there's any particular category that's not doing well. Technology looks like it's not doing great, which is sort of surprising, but let's take a more closer look at the subcategories of technology. All right, so immediately I can see that machines are really skewing my profitability for technology. And maybe I'll take a closer look at that. But machines, again, might not be a way that your users talk about that specific product line. So I'll go hover over subcategory here and take a closer look at those values. So here, you can see all of the values in the subcategory field, and you'll see this option for me to add aliases and synonyms for specific values as well. You saw me do that for fields, but now we're going a layer deeper and adding synonyms and aliases for the values. So here I have machines. You can see I've added a synonym for printers, because that's actually how I may refer to that class of goods. And now let's take a closer look at machines. So I might look at the profit ratio, which is PR, for printers, and show each product name. Here you can see I'm using both field and value synonyms to take the profit ratio, take a closer look at machines, and break that down for actual each specific item of machines or product or printers that I sell. And again, that's sorted here, and I can scroll down and see all of the printers that aren't doing well. And if I want to filter that down to just the unprofitable ones, I can just do that by asking profit ratio less than 0, and filter that down to my unprofitable machines, and use this share link option to send that out to my sales rep or my finance team to take a closer look. And that sharing happens without creating or saving any content on the site or server. These are ephemeral copies of that Ask Data session that you can use to share your ad hoc analysis, and people will pick up right where you left off. Great. I just want to show one more example, and then we'll talk about some of the integrations of Ask Data into the platform. One of the most common calculations that we do in finance and sales and a variety of other domains is time series-based calculations, specifically looking at growth. And I can do that with Ask Data by asking for the daily growth or potentially the monthly growth of sales. And you can see that we've created this ad hoc table calculation to compute the month-over-month difference over sales by order date. And you can see that by just asking that question in natural language, we've built that table calculation on the fly without having to have previously defined or built that into the data model. Okay, so now I've walked through a few examples. I want to show you some of the other peripheral capabilities of Fast Data. One of my favorite capabilities is usage analytics, which gives data source owners and administrators a glimpse into how people are leveraging Fast Data with those data sources. You can see how that usage is growing over time, what are the most common fields that are being used, and that's a great signal for you to understand how you might focus on adding synonyms for the fields that people care about, or removing the fields that aren't being used in the data source. You can also see the actual questions that people are asking, and we show two different perspectives of those. The actual intent, and then the question itself. And it's important to show both because, again, as I mentioned, we have almost an infinite different amount of ways that we can ask about the same intent. So it's useful to aggregate the intent so you can see what people care about. But it's also helpful to see the actual questions in terms of how people are reasoning about these concepts. So you can see how those questions are being asked. We found it to be super helpful and we've received a lot of positive commentary for that. Okay. Where did that other session go? All right. Just like Richard, I'm being a little. Okay, let's move on. You saw Fast Data being used directly on the data source, but that's not the only way to take advantage of it. Starting in 2019.3, you can embed Fast Data in a variety of different ways, directly into dashboards in Tableau or outside of Tableau into your websites or analytical portals. So you can see here, in this dashboard right here, that I have this Ask Data embedded icon up here. And that allows me to bring the Ask Data experience right where my users are today. And I can take full advantage of all the capabilities that you just saw and ask questions right there on top of the dashboard. So that's a great way of bringing Ask Data into a variety of different workflows and bring it to where your users are today. So again, I can just simply ask questions here, how many employees by country, and it's really the same exact Ask Data experience, but just there in the context of the dashboard. That's just a quick glimpse of the capabilities of Ask Data, and I'll pass it back over to Kim.